Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhineet Shukla, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. The G20 Sherpas meeting in Kumarkam showcases India's prowess in digital public infrastructure. The first G20 Disaster Working Group meeting under India's G20 presidency concludes on a positive note. G20 Tourism Working Group meeting begins in Siliguri. Georgia becomes the first American assembly to pass a resolution against Hinduphobia and anti-Hindu bigotry. Joint Defence Cooperation meeting between India and Philippines held with focus on issues of mutual and regional interests. India-Sri Lanka bilateral maritime exercise to begin on the 3rd of April in Colombo. And in sports, India's ace shuttler PV Sindhu reaches Madrid Spain Masters final defeating Yeo Jia Min of Singapore. India's Sherpa at the G20 summit, Amitabh Kant, on Saturday said that the second Sherpa meet, which concluded at Kumarkam the same evening, ended on a very forward-looking, constructive and positive note. Briefing media persons at Kumarkam on the outcome of the two-day event, Amitabh Kant said that there was 99% agreement on all substantive issues. The Sherpa meet demonstrated India's convening power as the presidency could ensure the participation of all G20 countries and its Sherpas. He said the discussions were held in a very positive and constructive manner, which really enriched the whole concept of sustainable development goals. He said over 50 meets were held in 30 Indian cities so far, which substantially contributed to a huge improvement in regional infrastructure. Bilaterals were held with 14 countries and similar meetings with the remaining 6 will be completed tonight. Besides Mr. Kant, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi and Joint Secretary in the G20 Secretariat Abhay Thakur were also present at the briefing. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Sunday flagged off the Vande Bharat Express train between Rani Kamalapati Railway Station in Bhopal and Hazrat Nizamuddin Railway Station in Delhi. The train will cover a distance of 701 kilometers in 7 hours 30 minutes and will run on all days except Saturday. It will have stoppages at Virangana Lakshmibai Jhansi, Gwalior and Agra. Prime Minister said, Indian Railways is becoming synonymous with convenience for the common families of the country. He listed upgrades like railway station modernization, Wi-Fi facilities on 6,000 stations and CCTV on 900 stations in this regard. Mr. Modi highlighted the popularity of Vande Bharat among the youth and the growing demand for Vande Bharat from every corner of the country. Prime Minister also highlighted the benefits of the train for tourism in the area as Sanchi, Bhimbetka, Bhojpur and Udayagiri caves will start getting more footfalls. He said, this will also improve the opportunities for employment, income and self-employment. Mr. Modi congratulated the people of Madhya Pradesh for getting their first Vande Bharat train. The King of Bhutan, Jigme Khesar Namgyal Wangchuk, will be on an official visit to India from the 3rd to 5th of this month. He will be accompanied by Lyonpo Dr. Tandi Dorji, Minister of Foreign Affairs and External Trade and senior officials of Bhutan. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs said that the visit of the King of Bhutan is in keeping with the long-standing tradition of regular high-level exchanges between the two countries. During the visit, he will meet with President Draupadi Murmu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The External Affairs Minister and senior officials will also call on the King of Bhutan. The ministry said, India and Bhutan enjoy unique ties of friendship and cooperation, which are characterized by understanding and mutual trust. It said the visit would provide an opportunity to both the sides to review the entire gamut of bilateral cooperation, including economic and development cooperation. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. Now let's have a look at G20 events roundup for the past and the upcoming week. India is hosting a series of meetings for G20 delegates across the country.
G20 India 2023. One Earth, one family, one future.
The G20 meetings under India's presidency in the run-up to the summit on September 9th and 10th in New Delhi are gathering momentum. 46 meetings have been completed in 27 cities across the country so far. India's soft power and its emergence as a prominent tourism destination has been in focus at the ongoing G20 deliberations. In this backdrop, the second G20 Tourism Working Group TWG meeting began in Siliguri on Saturday. More than 130 delegates from the G20 member countries, invitee countries and international organizations along with tourism industry partners, state tourism and local tour operators are participating in the meeting. Union Minister for Tourism, Culture and Development of Northeastern Region G. Kishan Reddy will be attending the meet. The highlight will be on the prospects and potential of the northeastern part of India as a tourist destination. The visiting foreign delegates will get exposure to the tea industry, Darjeeling Himalayan Railway and adventure tourism. Another significant event this week has been the second Sherpa meet in Cochin. The formal deliberations, which began on the 30th of March, will draw to a close on Saturday evening. On the sidelines of the plenary session, Union Minister of State for External Affairs Mr. Muralidharan said, apart from the streams already planned, a G20 Chief Scientific Advisors Roundtable, disaster risk reduction and a meet on startups are also on the cards. The Chief Scientific Advisors meet will try to find ways and means to overcome the challenges and issues in the field of science and technology, while the meet on disaster risk reduction will discuss issues relating to climatic challenges. The first day of the second G20 Sherpa meeting on Friday saw a day-long side event on the critical role of digital public infrastructure (DPI) in improving development outcomes. It also showcased India's vast experience in implementing DPI at scale in the past decade. The event was organized by the G20 Secretariat in partnership with NASSCOM, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Digital Impact Alliance. India's G20 Presidency Secretariat, in collaboration with the United Nations in India and Observer Research Foundation, hosted another side event on green development. The event, titled Need for an Ambitious Vision for 21st Century, was held on Thursday, March the 30th. G20 members have extended full support to the developmental priorities that have been spelt out by India in the bilateral and Troika meetings held on Saturday. Speaking to media persons at Kumarakam, India's Sherpa Amitabh Kant said bilaterals were held with Russia, Italy and Brazil. The G20 Troika meeting with Indonesia, Brazil and South Africa was also held. A late-night meeting is also scheduled to take place tonight on emerging market economy. The G20 Sherpa said the members appreciated the path-breaking work by India in the field of digital public infrastructure. It came out as a learning experience for many countries. He observed that the world is in need of solutions and India's presidency is looking at how it can deliver it to the world and posterity. The week saw the second G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group ECSWG in Gandhinagar from the 27th to the 29th of March. The participants shared views on the outcome of the priority areas. These include arresting land degradation, accelerating ecosystem restoration and enriching biodiversity, promoting a sustainable and climate-resilient blue economy, and encouraging resource efficiency and circular economy. The conference ended on a note of collaboration with a goal to refine the proposed outcomes under the G20 India presidency. The discussions during this meeting will be taken forward at the third ECSWG meeting in Mumbai from the 21st to the 23rd of May. The second G20 Infrastructure Working Group IWG meeting under the Indian G20 presidency was held in Visakhapatnam on the 29th of March. The two-day meeting was co-chaired by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, along with Australia and Brazil. 57 delegates from 14 G20 member countries, 8 invitees and 10 international organizations attended the meeting. They deliberated on various aspects of infrastructure investments, including developing infrastructure as an asset class, promoting quality infrastructure investment and identifying innovative instruments for mobilizing financial resources was in focus. Members agreed on the way forward for important deliverables for the year. These include the flagship theme of financing cities of tomorrow, inclusive, resilient and sustainable, making cities economic centers of growth, financing urban infrastructure and building future-ready urban infrastructure were on the agenda. On the sidelines of the IWG meeting, a roundtable of international organizations to discuss infrastructure taxonomies was organized. A capacity building workshop for the G20 delegates was also held on the 30th of March. Ramnagar, Uttarakhand hosted the first meeting of the G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable G20 CSAR. It witnessed intense discussion on issues of transboundary S&T issues of mutual interest on the 29th of March. G20 CSAR is the flagship event under India's G20 presidency and led by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. Themes ranging from opportunities in One Health for better disease control and pandemic preparedness, synergizing global efforts to expand access to scholarly scientific knowledge, diversity, equity, inclusion, and action-oriented global S&T policy dialogue came to the fore. The meeting, held at Dhikuli Resort of Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve, saw the participation of around 54 chief science advisors from 18 countries. These include USA, Argentina, China, France, Germany, Indonesia, Italy, and Japan, among others. The first G20 Trade and Investment Working Group meeting took place in Mumbai on the 29th and 30th of March. Over 100 delegates from G20 member countries, invitee countries, regional groupings and international organizations attended the meeting. They discussed accelerating global trade and investment and achieving sustainable development goals. In his press interaction, Union Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal highlighted the theme of India's G20 presidency to promote universal values and adoption of a human-centric approach. He said that the group has an important role in formulating concrete outcomes for inclusive growth that drive trade and investment across the global south. The second Agricultural Deputies meeting of the Agricultural Working Group took place from the 29th to the 31st of March 2023 in Chandigarh. The event saw the participation of delegates from 19 member countries, 10 invited countries and 10 international organizations. 4 thematic areas were discussed: food security and nutrition, sustainable agriculture with a climate-smart approach, inclusive agricultural value chains and food systems, and digitalization for agricultural transformation. The event proved to be an important platform for countries to come together and work towards a sustainable future for agriculture and food security. The first Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group meeting under India's G20 presidency witnessed a very productive, positive and collaborative discussion on 5 priority areas identified for this group. It was a 3-day event that took place in Gandhinagar from the 30th of March to the 1st of April 2023. The priority areas were early warning for all, disaster-resilient infrastructure, and stronger national financial frameworks. On the third and final day of this working group meeting, a technical session on ecosystem-based approaches to disaster risk reduction was also held. Let us take a look at the upcoming G20 events next week and beyond. The second Energy Working Group meeting will be held in Gandhinagar from 2nd to 4th April in Sherpa Track. The second Employment Working Group meeting is scheduled at Guwahati from the 3rd to the 5th of April in Sherpa Track. The second Development Working Group meeting will be held in Kumarakam from the 6th to the 9th of April in Sherpa Track. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Ministry of Mines and Ministry of Power will host an official side event on the 2nd of April in Gandhinagar in Gujarat. The theme of the event will be diversifying renewables and critical mineral supply chains to advance energy transition. This event is a part of the second Energy Transition Working Group meeting of India's G20 presidency. The event will focus on diversifying and securing renewable energy and critical mineral supply chains for energy transitions, including promoting circularity in value chains. Tripura is all set to host the first ever G20 summit of the state, commencing on the 3rd of April. Clean energy for a greener future is the theme for the G20 science event scheduled to be held at the Happania International Fairground on the 3rd and 4th of April. The opening session is scheduled for 3rd April, followed by the exhibition stalls and an investor meet in the second session. Later in the evening, a light and sound show will be organized for the G20 delegates at the Ujayanta Palace. A yoga session will be organized at Oxygen Park on the 4th of April with the delegates of the G20 countries.
G20 India 2023. One Earth, one family, one future.
The 10th edition of the annual India-Sri Lanka Bilateral Maritime Exercise Linex 2023 scheduled to be held in Colombo on the 3rd of April. The exercise is being conducted in 2 phases of 3 days each, and the harbour phase followed by sea phase. In the US, Georgia Assembly has passed a resolution condemning Hinduphobia, making it the first American state to take such a legislative measure. Condemning Hinduphobia and anti-Hindu bigotry, the resolution said Hinduism is one of the world's largest and oldest religions with over 1.2 billion adherents in over 100 countries, and that Hinduism encompasses an array of diverse traditions and belief systems with values of acceptance, mutual respect and peace. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on US Court's judgment to allow spouses of H-1B visa holders in tech sector to work in America. The participants are Dr. Harshvardhan Pant, Strategic Analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, AIR Correspondent, as moderator.
In today's program, we would discuss about the U.S. court judgment which allows spouses of H-1B visa holders in the tech sector to work in America. Dr. Pant, how important is an H-1B visa to work in the U.S. tech sector to begin with?
Well, it is a very important category. The American tech sector in the last few decades has expanded phenomenally in the U.S. And one of the reasons of their expansion and of their central role in American economy has been their ability of tech companies to tap in the best talent across the world, and in particular from India and China. Now, what tends to happen is that an H-1B visa, which is a non-immigrant visa, it allows companies in the U.S., tech companies, to employ foreign workers in occupations, in particular, in specialized categories. So there, the tech companies do not find or do not have in-house expertise, in-country expertise. They hire thousands of employees every year from India and China, which is sort of space that increasingly, has become the defining feature of the American tech sector. Their ability to tap on the best talent in the world has allowed them to expand, has allowed them to be innovative. And so H-1B visa actually sits at the heart of American tech space in more ways than one. And therefore it is so important, and therefore it has become so important for the tech companies, and also become very, very politically contentious at a time when employment opportunities broadly are dwindling in the U.S. And therefore it has created a number of these conversations around what needs to be done, how it needs to be reformed, and what curtailments are needed to ensure that American workers get some preferences. And I think the debate on H-1B visa, what has happened in this decision, also reflects some of those concerns and issues.
So do tell us about this U.S. court decision on the part of the district judge regarding allowing spouses to work as well. How does this affect and impact the Indian diaspora in the U.S.?
See, it impacts it very significantly, because a lot of the people who get employed go to the U.S. Hoping and thinking that they would be able to live where both of them, their spouses would be able to work. Now, and this was something that had been going on for some time, almost I think 100,000 work authorizations have been issued by U.S. to spouses of H-1B workers over the last few years. So it's a significant number. But because of this new regulation, that employment authorization would not be issued to spouses of certain categories, had created a lot of concern in diaspora that how people be able to sustain themselves in an economy where the cost of living had been rising. So you end up in a very difficult situation where either the worker feels that he or she has to live alone in the U.S. without the family, or whether they need to relocate back to India and give up the job in the U.S. because it becomes financially unsustainable. So I think the decision by dismissing the lawsuit filed by Safe Jobs USA perhaps gives great relief to a number of Indian diaspora, which have been worked up, which have been concerned about the implications of their spouses not getting employment authorization. So I think it will certainly ease that concern. It will certainly ease hopefully the economic burden on these families, and hopefully allow the H-1B visa holders to live a more peaceful and contented life within the confines of their own families, without the sword hanging that any time they'll be asked to relocate or they will face financial troubles.
So after this regulation in the permit was relaxed, Safe Jobs USA filed this lawsuit which was dismissed at the U.S. district judge level. Do tell us about Safe Jobs USA. What is the nature of this party?
See, in the last few years, what has happened in the U.S. is that there's a number of organizations have come in arguing that, look, we need employment opportunities in the U.S. should primarily go to American workers. And this particular organization, Save Jobs USA, basically is an organization comprising primarily of IT workers. And their primary grouse is that they have lost their jobs to H-1B workers. And therefore, they have been making this case that, look, it should be more difficult for H-1B workers to come to the U.S. and work. And one of the ways in which you can make that difficult is by not allowing their spouses to work and earn in the U.S. So therefore, they filed this lawsuit. And of course, this lawsuit was opposed by tech companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Amazon, because they knew that the reason why they are getting these H-1B workers is because they lacked talent and they lacked that particular expertise in the U.S. So without the H-1B workers, they won't be able to sustain their work, their companies. The Save Jobs USA wanted to make it difficult for H-1B workers to come and work. So I think one has to look at it within the broader political economic context of the U.S., where this desire to have employment opportunities in the U.S. primarily for Americans has gained traction. It was one of the reasons why we saw a lot of this being supported by even President Trump when he came to office. So there has been this political mobilization along those lines. But for the time being, the Save Jobs USA their lawsuit has been dismissed by the local court. But it remains to be seen whether this will be appealed against and whether they would go forward with taking it to higher courts.
Well, yes, the right to appeal is there. But speaking of rights, what is the scope of immigration rights in the U.S., especially for tech workers who land in the U.S. with an H-1B visa?
Well, they are quite, it's very restrictive actually, because H-1B visas are, as we have been discussing, they are primarily they cater to a particular employment deficit in the U.S., a particular specialty deficit in the U.S. So it is a non-immigrant visa, that primarily is aimed at allowing U.S. companies to employ foreign workers. Now, and technology companies, of course, given the nature of their field, depend on this visa to get the best talent from countries abroad. But as far as the rights of the H-1B visa holders are concerned, they're very restrictive, because they eventually have to go back. They can't move from one job to another in the U.S. As part of this visa. So if they want to change their profession, if they want to change their job, then they have to go back to the U.S. and apply for H-1B visa again. So in that sense, H-1B visa is primarily about a particular job opening for which a particular person will be recruited to go back to the U.S., do that particular job for the time frame, and then, of course, he'll be expected to go back to his or her own country. And now, so it's a very, it's a specialized visa, and it requires specialized knowledge. Now, increasingly, what has also been happening is that there have been demands for reforming the system. So we just a few days back, we have had legislation being introduced in the U.S. Senate, which calls for a comprehensive overhaul of this program, because a lot of American policymakers, politicians are asking for greater transparency in the way foreign workers are being recruited. And they are demanding that this H-1B visa creates a lot of avenues for fraud. So therefore, they are saying that, look, what we want now is we want to have workers at the higher end of the spectrum, where you are linking their skills with, where you are linking their specialty occupation with a bachelor's degree or higher. So again, you can see that what they want to do is that they don't want lower-end skilled workers to come to the U.S. I think the political dynamic is in the favor of that those jobs should go to Americans. There is a sense that many in the U.S. perhaps cannot fill the high-end technology jobs, but what they can fill is the low-end technology jobs, and they don't want foreign workers to come and fill the low-end technology jobs. So I think there again we are witnessing a political back and forth, and since this is a bipartisan legislation, I think this is going to come to fruition sooner rather than later, and we are going to see more tightening of H-1B regulations because of the political considerations that are driving it at the moment, that more jobs should be available for American workers. So by making it more difficult to get opening up low-end technology jobs to foreign workers, they are going to now focus more on the high-end technology spectrum. So that is, I think, what H-1B visa does, is that that while it allows tech companies to fill a certain vacuum in their structures and processes where they don't have domestic expertise, I think politically it is becoming very difficult to sustain an open-ended H-1B program as well.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Harsh V. Pant, for talking to us on this program and discussing at length how the U.S. court judgment that allows spouses of H-1B visa holders in the tech sector to work in America.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The UAE delegation recently attended the second meeting of the International Financial Architecture Working Group, that is IFAWG, within the G20 Finance Track for 2023. The meeting, which took place in Paris, France on March 30th and 31st, brought together representatives from G20 member countries, invited countries and international organizations to discuss the progress of the IFAWG work plan for 2023. The discussions focused on various topics including the sustainability of sovereign debt and ways to limit its increase, proposals and directions to support vulnerable countries, and ongoing work by multinational development banks on the implementation of recommendations by the Independent Review on Multinational Development Banks' capital adequacy frameworks. Additionally, the members shared their views on the impact of climate change-related policies on capital flows. The members agreed to review the progress of the IFAWG work plan during the next meeting, which will be scheduled by the India G20 presidency. The fourth Joint Defence Cooperation Committee meeting between India and the Philippines was held in New Delhi yesterday. The Indian delegation was led by Joint Secretary in Ministry of Defence Amitabh Prasad, while the Philippines delegation was headed by Assistant Secretary for Strategic Assessments and International Affairs, Department of National Defence, Pablo M. Lorenzo. During the meeting, both the sides reviewed the ongoing bilateral defence cooperation and discussed effective and practical initiatives to further expand the engagements. The co-chairs reaffirmed their commitment to implement the 2006 agreement concerning defence cooperation based on mutual trust and understanding, common interest and shared values of democracy and the rule of law. Defence Ministry said, both the sides agreed to initiate measures to enhance cooperation in defence industry and technology domain and look forward to greater synergy in effectively deepening bilateral cooperative engagements across the spectrum. They discussed cooperation in multilateral forums and noted complementarities in their approaches to the Indo-Pacific region. They also decided to hold regular consultations on issues of mutual interest. Sri Lanka's Power Minister Kanchana Wijesekara has said that the India-Sri Lanka Power Grid Connectivity Project will be finalized in the coming few weeks. Speaking at a dinner organized by the Sri Lanka-India Society to commemorate the 74th Republic Day of India and the 75th Independence Day of Sri Lanka on Friday, the minister said that Sri Lanka will develop northern and eastern provinces with a specific focus on Trincomalee with India's assistance. He elaborated on the planned projects in terms of port development, industrial zone and energy hub. He recounted the tough 12-month journey Sri Lanka had endured during the economic difficulties which had gripped the island nation with an acute crisis of forex reserves resulting. He thanked India for helping Sri Lanka through humanitarian assistance, credit lines and vaccines, as well as helping Sri Lanka get approval for IMF funding. He said the foundation that has been laid over the last year will open up opportunities for businesses in both the countries. Mr. Wijesekara said, India Energy Week held in February this year in Bengaluru showed that India has overtaken the global leaders in the sector. The two-time Olympic medalist and former world badminton champion PV Sindhu reached the Madrid Spain Masters final, beating Yeo Jia Min of Singapore in the straight set 22-20 and 24-22 in Madrid on Saturday. A quick look at the headlines once again. The G20 Sherpas meeting in Kumarakam showcases India's prowess in digital public infrastructure. The first G20 Disaster Working Group meeting under India's G20 presidency concludes on a positive note. G20 Tourism Working Group meeting begins in Siliguri. Georgia becomes the first American assembly to pass a resolution against Hinduphobia and anti-Hindu bigotry. Joint Defence Cooperation meeting between India and Philippines held with focus on issues of mutual and regional interest. India-Sri Lanka bilateral maritime exercise to begin on the 3rd of April in Colombo. And in sports, India's ace shuttler PV Sindhu reaches Madrid Spain Masters final, defeating Yeo Jia Min of Singapore. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite bhajan Vaishno Jan by artists from Ghana.
उपकार कहे
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.